with me on LinkedIn. Um, our topic today is about the future of experimentation and experimentation agencies with a heavy focus on AI. It's a hot topic at the moment. Lots of people are doing stuff. What's real? What's hype? What might the next generation of future agencies and companies look like? Many thanks to Convert.com and Speero for making this happen because I love this stuff. Um, if you work for an agency, this QR code and link, please fill in our survey if you haven't done so already. We will put a link in the chat for you as well. Please fill it out and help us with our 2026 research. It closes 30th of April. So we're just looking for the last entries from you. Thank you. And a little bit of admin stuff. I'm not doing a long intro, loads of slides. I want more time for the panel and hear what they have to say. Please put your questions in the Q&A tab. There's a really important reason for that. That's because if you ask good questions, you get a chance to win at the end. There's going to be a prize draw for Claude 5X at the end. I know I'm always running out of tokens. So you won't have to for the next month if you win that. So hang around till later and see who gets it. There'll be a recording link after the event for you too. And now to your panel. So your panel today are Lucia van den Brink from the initial, Ben Labay from Speero, and Michael Saint Laurent from Gain Conversion. And I'm really chuffed that they all managed to make it along. Thank you very much. Lucia is really rethinking the entire underlying model for this work by helping companies who are kind of renting or doing experimentation in a superficial way to really start truly owning it internally and becoming a transformative force. Ben and team are doing amazing things with his own agency and clients in terms of AI stuff, sharing some really good stuff recently. So make sure you don't miss his posts. And Michael and his crew have been busy too. As we predicted last year, some orgs would kind of productize their IP and create new types of products with them. And Gain Conversion have recently built a tool that's in beta at the moment called Lupin. So let me get the panel to say hello at this point, and I'll just turn the screen sharing off. One sec. There we go. So, hi everyone. Please introduce yourselves. Please say hello and tell us about the great stuff that you've been doing. Who wants to start? Go on, Ben.
Yeah, yeah, I'm unmuted. Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. We're working on a ton of AI stuff with the agency and with our clients. Just having a lot of fun with it. I think that if I were to sum up a little bit of the story arc or the arc of the last 6 months, we're going from a lot of one-off agent builds and one-off workflow builds into more systems architecture stuff at the moment, building a lot of like bespoke software that will be stood up and then decomposed at some point. But in doing so, building out a vision for how to orchestrate this for ourselves internally at Speero, but also for our clients and how we can take these agents that we built for ourselves and create analog versions of them for client stacks and client specific sets of data and workflows, et cetera. So that's the general arc that we're going through right now. And honestly, it's just been some of the funnest 6 months of my career in this work working with AI and building and being able to go fast with this has been just a delight. So yeah.
Thank you.
I can go next. Just to introduce myself. Hey everyone, I'm Lucia, and I actually started building websites with 11 years old. So, I'm just a total geek. I've been in-house running big experimentation programs, also worked at an agency, and that turned is actually Speero that I worked at, and now run my own agency. We have a small dedicated team with 5 people, and we also work a lot with AI, but we also have a lot of screw ups. So I'm here to be honest about what it is we're doing, what's going well, what's not going well. And our mission with the initial is basically helping other companies build in-house experimentation programs by servicing resources, but also helping build culture, automations if necessary, and provide resources. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thanks. And yeah, lastly, I'm Mike from Gain Conversion, or formerly known as Conversion.com. Yeah, I've been in the space about 12 years, and Conversion works primarily with large enterprises. So that might be a perspective that I'll bring to the table there is like working with large companies and navigating the politics and procurements and how AI can be used in those types of situations. And I think we work alongside our clients essentially either as like fully outsourced teams or as partners to in-house programs and everything in between. We're sort of globally based with offices in Vancouver and London, or over 100 people of experimentation experts. So a pretty large team focused exclusively on doing this. And so that means lots of playground to build and trial AI products. And we have whole dedicated teams, of full-time staff that all they do is build AI technology for the experimentation space. And yeah, similar to Ben, I'd echo that it's been super fun last 6 months that it's become very possible to play with technology in a way that's never been possible before. And it's causing me to completely rethink, the entirety of how experimentation can and should be done. And excited to have this chat today with everyone and share what we've been working on.
Thank you. That's a great point, and it's one that we'll touch on today. I'm interested in concrete examples here. Everyone says, "Oh, we use AI to do user research," but I'm interested in specifics. I want one example from you of stuff that's worked really well. It's been transformative, right? Not a laundry list of stuff you've tried and some have worked. I want one good one and one that sucked, right? The one that you thought might work but was a total failure. Um, Lucia, do you want to tell us about your pros and cons?
Ooh, it's hard to select just one though. But yeah, fair question.
Yeah,
Let's start with
hard to
the
select one. Sorry.
Yeah, let's start with a few that have really improved our speed or workflow. So I think, it all started with our front end devs that suddenly could work much faster and they do a lot of agentic work by now. So I think that's still one of the biggest, yeah, speed ups that we've seen. But also we're doing post-test analysis through automations and workflows. I also use it a lot for hiring. So we have hired a meteor and a senior recently, and it helps to do a lot, like even check if assignments are delivered on deadline, yes or no, because that often says a lot. And anything else we're doing that's cool is, I would say, we're doing a lot of small things as well, like suggesting new tests, like where are the empty spots in the program and how do we fill that up as efficiently as possible. Then the fuck ups. And I think those are actually really fun. So
Yes.
thanks for that question, Greg. Fuck ups, I think a lot of people started with prioritization and trying to automate that. And that also can go very, very wrong. So I've seen a program where that went wrong, and luckily we caught it on time. But then, even if you would use a framework like a PXL and it gets some of the forms wrong, then that means the tests you're prioritizing are totally messed up. And what comes on top might not actually be the best first test to experiment with. So that's something that we have played around with. Also, I think one of the biggest things is that always when we use it, oh, and we also use it a lot to make mockups. So that has also speed up a lot of our process. We just have a check mark in Airtable, and if we want to mock up for a client, just to show the idea, just to make it visual, and we can say, hey, this is not the real thing. We will make the real thing for you, but this is just the idea. That has speed up a lot. But then the tricky part is that you actually need to think twice as hard because when you use AI, it looks good, right? In the first instance, and you're like, wow, this was so easy. looks so good, whether that's text, whether that's a mock-up, but you actually need to spend twice as much energy on time on actually checking, is this the correct copy? Will this actually influence what we're looking for? Does it even make any sense? And that is a quality check that we kind of needed to teach to our teams as well. So everyone is really excited and it's easy and wow, we have created this thing. But then the actual, we've called it putting on the bullshit glasses and coming back to that work and being really, really critical on it. This is a skill that we're focusing on in our teams right now, and that we're really pushing team members for to be more critical. Because with AI, we kind of need to be more critical in that sense. So I would say that's something we have been focusing on.
Great examples. Thanks.
I would maybe add to that. I think everything that Lucia said, but just to supplement that, just to add on top of it, a couple things that come to mind with regards to what's working. There's a concept of like debate clubs or committees or councils that we're expanding to almost everything, and it's you take that concept and everything becomes a really target-rich environment to apply it. You take the idea like decisioning when you come to the end of a result and you need to make a decision. As tests get more and more complicated, to bring in all the consideration, whether it's brand or legal or even like lifetime value perspectives, if you don't have those metrics tightened up, to bring in the different perspectives, not from like debate club, but from a like just a let's bring in the council to weigh on this, and it will flip decisions if you bring in that perspective. That's on the decision side of things. On the entry side of things, it can do a lot of lifting to help train and educate. If you've got kind of a bunch of product teams and some are testing more than others, and that education mindset is different among them. When you submit a test idea and having that sort of counsel and the different perspectives of these agents say or advise you on the quality of a hypothesis and maybe say, hey, does this actually match our company's strategic roadmap and kind of the OKRs that we've got for this quarter? It can be a great tool to just level up everyone and to standardize a lot of these things that we're like training one-on-one. It can teach skills right in line when people are asking the questions of like what statistics to use and things like this. So we're doing just a ton of council slash committee AI building, and then evals on top of that, bringing in the company data model, bringing in customer intent data layer type of information in there as well. So that's just been an incredibly rich area with a lot of success. In terms of
That's been one of the
failures,
biggest things. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
yeah, there's a lot of paper cuts. There's a lot of like inaccuracy, and Lucia kind of hit upon a lot of the symptoms there. I can't, you know, in lieu of like AI deleting an entire database, which there's news about that happening around the world. Luckily, we haven't had that happen. I think it's just, people that are stuck in that industrial mindset and think that this is an output where it's not. AI is middle to middle. It's not end to end. Like you still the human needs to be at the nodes and the AI is on the edge. And so I think the fuck up is where you make the assumption that it's end to end. And it's just people being lazy, people not reviewing, and myself included. Like it's when you can produce so much so quickly, it gets easy to rely on this tool, and that's where you use the hammer to hit your thumb really quickly. So not a specific fuck up for you, but just my take on where the nuance lies there. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, then on our side, I think that like a lot of people when they think about using AI technology, it's very quick to jump to the LLM and sort of a chat interface as being where the value is created. But I think that when we look at probably where we actually are seeing value in terms of if we count that as like usage and adoption, not necessarily the ability to produce something, that we're actually probably seeing the most value created from our vector databases, like the
Mm.
ability to actually store large quantities of data about what's been learned insights from experiments, just sort of the database of what has been tested in a way that becomes queryable way beyond what a traditional search function could do. And I think that that's probably like in the day-to-day work, the biggest actual success and unlock is to have that information that can be now queried and pulled into all sorts of different teams, which is an amazing unlock that has come from AI technology, but isn't necessarily like just an LLM. And so I think that's probably where we're seeing the most value on a day-to-day basis. Um, and in terms of the fuck ups, I think similar to Ben, I wouldn't say that we've had there's been no huge moment that's like, oh, we really made a big mistake here. But I think the
Things
challenges
that
we
didn't
face,
work so well, things that
yeah,
really didn't work so well,
the
or maybe didn't work as well as you thought they would.
yeah, I think to like I guess reframe the question to how my experience has been with it. It's been more like I feel like we've built cool stuff and then just no one's used it. Even internally. And I feel like that's more of the place where, like, if I was working on a product feature and I'm like, oh, this is cool, we just totally automated this piece of the process. Well, why wouldn't everybody use this? And then the reality is like the mess up is that we forget the human side of like how hard it is to change someone's natural workflow of like how they've been ingrained in doing that work for so long. And and I think underestimating the value that like human storytelling is like a human wants to have a lot of control over the output and how it's framed. And yes, we can produce an output with AI, but like when it sort of loses that storytelling aspect often that allows like that is kind of preventing someone from fully adopting those features. So I feel like our fuck ups is more like how much we invest time in building things that don't necessarily get adopted. But I kind of feel like that's part of the game is you got
It's
to build 10 things
experimentation.
and two of them will work, you know?
This is product development versus distribution. Distribution has always
Yeah,
been the
it's a totally
problem.
different.
Always been the problem.
Yeah.
So,
Now it's more the problem than ever. Distribution. It's
yeah,
yeah.
that leads us nicely on to workflows. We'll start with you, Ben, on this one. I see a difference. There are some companies who are totally reimagining their workflows with AI, and then there are other people who are trying to apply AI to their current workflows and processes without having the imagination to say, how could we do this with AI tools? Which may be it's an entirely different question rather than how can we speed up the stuff we already do, which I think is the wrong way to approach it. What what does it take to move from like farting around in an ad hoc way to getting to that place where you're getting a real advantage from it? What does it take to make that leap?
Yeah, this I always think automation should be the last step. And Michael referred to this earlier in terms of rethinking how you approach just the program generally. I think the first step is question the requirements, question whether we need to do something, and be willing to be very disruptive and be, um, I use the term chaos monkey there. I also think that it's good to think through this idea that the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. The in Lenny's podcast, he recently interviewed this woman. I forget her name, but she's at Anthropic, and she talked. And let me share the screen. Can I share my screen real quick on this? Just one slide thing.
Sure.
This is what. Oh wait, let me. It's messing up here. Hold on. Um, what I mean by this is now we have all these workflows. We have all these different ways of doing things. Um, where's this thing? Chrome present this thing here. No, it's not letting me share it. I'm pressing the button. It's not letting me get to it.
Ah, it
Um,
is now. We can see it.
so this here, are you looking at this pitch deck thing here?
Yep.
So you're like we have all these workflows and the connections of all these tests here. This woman that talked to Lenny on his podcast said that Anthropic team are working in Claude and Slack. That's it. Now, maybe not their sales team is probably also in Salesforce, but in terms of a product team, that's where they live. That's it. That's all that they're doing. And of course, Claude is connected to all of these things behind the scenes. Again, the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. So you think about like software, like where does it fit? How does it work? All that kind of stuff. So just a quick share there on where I think it's possible to disrupt how work is being done. And that's, by the way, the mission of any experimentation program is to change how work is being done, to change people's behaviors and perceptions through interventions. We experiment, we see if it works, and then if it does, if we learn is, you know, is evidenced by changes of behavior, right? We change how we do things. So I think that experimentation programs are ripe to take advantage of AIs. If experimentation is a Trojan horse to make change happen, AI is sort of the nuclear bombed version of that. So, question the requirement is the first thing. Like, do we need to do this? Do we need these UIs? Do we need this software? Question the requirement.
Mike, what do you think it takes to get to this point of reimagining rather than tinkering?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I really like the question that you raised, which is one that I've been trying to prompt my teams with, which is that, right, it's very easy to try to apply the AI technology to how we do work today and then expect the outcomes to come out in a similar fashion. Whereas I think the right question is what you've correctly identified, which is what should experimentation look like now that this technology exists? And I think that that completely changes the dynamics of how we might want to think about that question. That if before it costs, X thousand dollars to build an experiment and there's a payoff ratio, if suddenly that payoff ratio is different, then the volumes of what you should be expecting and the bar for quality, I think, changes as to like what is the optimal output for a company. So I think when we're thinking about what to do sort of to scale from tinkering to workflows, I think there's a couple questions that we're asking, and one of them will be like is it a scalable thing? And, is it something that can be used across different programs and different teams or different pods, even inside of our own company? And then I think the other thing we're looking for is like, is there some sort of like, what are we hooking up to it that makes it unique? Which is sort of like, what's the IP advantage or something that we can like plug in that allows some sort of advantage to be created? Because I think, at least from an agency's perspective as well, we want to consider that there's all these questions that someone could just put into their own LLM. And knowledge essentially becomes like democratized or accessible by everyone. And so then what are the components that, every company has some unique positioning that gives, the ability to outperform an LLM by plugging things into that LLM, either like in through the system of how you've arranged the prompts and how you sequence your prompts and how you ask the questions, or to have like a fine-tuning data set that allows, the LLM to produce a better output. And so I think that like we're trying to look at those questions of, where is it that we can find scalable solutions that will be how experimentation should exist in a future state, as well as like where can we tie that into, proprietary information that allows to still be able to produce, superior performance.
Lucia, thank you.
Yeah, I think similar to the points of Ben and Michael that, it's also the distribution that matters a lot. So what we do is we use our agency as a playground. So we are the playground for building new ways of working. And if that works well for us, then we can help and implement that at a client. So our goal is to build in-house experimentation programs, Trojan horse in change, as it may. And then what we do is we use our agency as the playground. And then what works for us, for example, a simple example is just doing post-test analyses and automate that part. So first we try that for ourselves on our sites. And then later on, we start building that for clients, and it's actually super helpful for them. So in that sense, we're using like our own small little environment to bring those things to them. On the other hand, also our clients are really exploring AI, and most of them have really big budgets to come up with new AI solutions that also need to be validated and experimented with. And so with experimentation, we also help our clients validate the value of AI and the AI and all the things that they're building. And that's a point we might not have discussed yet, but that's also very interesting to see, like how do especially enterprises approach this age of AI. What are
Yeah.
they doing? Some are forcing their employees to work with AI, or some are saying you cannot use AI at all, and there's a lot of difference there as well.
Yeah, I've run some A/B tests to prove the value of AI and found in some
Okay.
cases that adding the AI feature on made the product experience worse and shifted
Same,
metrics
yeah,
down. So it's
yeah,
kind of like the meta of experimentation we're getting into here. These are all experiments, all this AI stuff, these are all experiments. We have a hypothesis that if applied in a particular way, that they're going to work to change behavior or do something, but we don't really know until we run an experiment and collect some data about it. So we need to test the AI features as well, not just the other product changes. So, another question, agentic tech, is this real or hype? Everyone's kind of talking this up. You've all kind of like touched on it. Um, what kind of problems deserve agentic thinking and design, Ben?
Um, almost everything. Again,
Almost
if
everything.
I bring in that concept of like middle to middle, and so um, AI is you know, it tackles the how, right? Not the what we work on. That's going to be a human choice. Not the why we work on it. That might be a human choice. But the how. And so your question is like, where does AI workflows or agentic workflows belong, and where doesn't it belong? Is that kind of another way to say what your
Yeah,
question?
yeah,
Um, I think it could, it's like paired programming. Like why not? And I think it could be useful in almost all applications. I don't. I question, I mean, I think in the US especially, there's a huge negative vibes around AI. There's a negative perception of the use of AI. But at the same time, in business, I think everyone is treating it as inevitable to incorporate, to leverage. So I don't know that it's that controversial in a lot of these worlds. I think a lot of people have some trust issues with it. A lot of people are using the hammer to hit their thumbs quite quickly and readily. Um, so I don't have a great answer on that. I do think it is inevitable and it
yeah,
could be applied to any workflow
yeah.
as long as
Anything
there's
to
those
add?
checks and balances that we've been kind of alluding to.
Of course. Anything to add, Mike?
Yeah, I think like Ben, you might have actually answered this in one of your previous answers, which was just like I feel like the misapplication is trying to expect it to do the end to end like everything. And I think that that's where like the real and hype kind of where the confusion might come from on the market side is like I feel like obviously the technology companies are going to want to sell end to end vision. But then end to end in practice is often not what is the right thing to do. And so I think, and that's certainly how we're thinking about intentional design of AI technology within gain conversion is trying to build with that in mind, is that there are components of the experimentation process that can be like either fully automated or you can get at least 75% of the way done using an AI sort of like actual tech, where I think that that is very, very real. And I don't think that's going away. And I'm trying to at least treat this internally like to me like the internet has just been invented. Like that's the level of scale of change, and it's going to completely change how we do business. And I do think that that's got to be an intentional design choice, not just for like as we're building technology, but also as systems. Is like it's the human components of checkpoints of like we can do work and then redirect your LLM and have it do work and then redirect it. And like go through a process where you can skip all of the large work portions, but guide it into the right location. And I think that's where like we can get to real outcomes and where we've seen real performance, actually be achieved when we're trying to do checkpoints there where we don't let an LLM try to go the whole way. Because we do
Thank,
often end up in the wrong spot when we've tried that.
thank you. Lucia,
Yeah.
insight on workflows and agents.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch upon also the difference between the two because, it might not be clear for everyone, but a workflow is basically like a railroad track that you lay, right? So you tell it exactly where to go, which step to take, and then it's just being followed. So that's really easy to do when you have all the steps in place and it is a repeatable process. But with agents, that's different, right? So an agent actually makes a decision on, oh, so if I speak about hiring, instead of now sending an invitation to a personality test, we're going to reject this person, or it just makes decisions on its own. So it can split out in multiple ways. And I think that part is still, I don't know, we're just getting started on that, it feels. And within our teams, the best people that are making use of that are actually the developers because then they really brief their agents in a way like this client is set up like this and this is the language, the coding language we use. And then that helps them create the code really fast. But along the way, it makes a lot of decisions on how to structure that code, what it should look like. So and I feel like that piece is the upgrade of the workflows that we've been doing. And workflows are great and they can speed up the process. But then the agentic stuff, it feels like we're just getting there. And I was talking to you before, Craig. It also feels like we're still huge imposters on this because not everything is figured out yet. We're trying
Everyone
to
seems to be
use
doing better
everything.
stuff.
Everyone does
Everyone's
better
doing
than
better
us,
stuff
right?
than me.
But
Like, oh, look at that look at that
yeah,
over there. Look at
yeah.
what he's doing. It's impossible to keep up
Hmm.
with everything. I
Yeah.
feel overwhelmed sometimes. It's just like, like a huge rain shower has come, like,
Yeah.
3 weeks worth of rain. It's just incredible. And it's all the time.
I saw, by the
Um,
way, a question in the chat to me, like how does an agency handle client data when using AI? Or actually a question before. Oh, there's already another question. Are all companies open for AI improvements, or do you still see some companies that are not open to that? And that's actually what I touch upon as well. So we were super enthusiastic. Like we have my brother in the team. He's head of automations, and he started building all kinds of cool stuff, and also for clients. And then also the clients started to discover what that means in terms of security. And some clients don't like it. Some brands really don't like it. And they have a lot of rules around it. And they will never allow you to create a workflow, even, for example. They won't even allow you to take AI meeting notes. So that's on the one side of the spectrum. And then if you want to build a workflow, you need to jump through a lot of hoops. And then the question for an agency is, are all those hoops really worth it or not? And then on the other hand, we also have like scale up companies that are just much more flexible with implementing all these things and all the rules around it. But if you look at a client that is like an enterprise insurance company, yeah, there it's all much slower. So it really depends, and I'm sure Michael and Ben can also speak on this, that there's such a range of companies and how they adapt and how you can help them with experimentation, but also AI adoption in general.
Yeah, same answer. I could add some nuance, but not a lot of substantive or helpful stuff. A lot of crazy stories. It's the Wild West in terms of adoption. We've got big, giant enterprises that are using a ton of AI, um, and we're doing it alongside them. We've got big, giant enterprises that we are contractually obligated to not use AI, including the meeting notes, and everything in between. And of course, we're having more fun with the ones that we can use AI with. So, I mean, that's just, I don't know if there's anything else more helpful to say there. Yeah.
no. Yeah, what do you mean you're not even doing meeting notes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We think about using AI, but we don't. Yeah. Um, I have a pricing question. I was interested in the research. I was trying to figure out what effect is all this stuff having on pricing or expectations. I'm just really curious about your thoughts. I know what's come back from the research so far, which is kind of interesting, but I'd like to know what you think, Lucia. How's AI
Pricing
changing
wise.
pricing and expectations, you know?
It hasn't come up that much, but I have to say we're much better in over delivering, which is great because our clients are happy, we're happy. So we're pushing out much more tests and sometimes we have more time to think about strategic things, but that's only when the process is really in place and the team is working really efficiently with all of that. But I would say pricing hasn't changed. Of course, that's something to play around with. Like maybe we can give a discount if we say like we will use AI for some kind of things, but it hasn't come up in any of our sales talks, honestly. And for me, yeah, the most fun part is actually over delivering and like really making clients happy. And instead of just building experiments, also make sure to spend more time on strategy and building culture because that's really part of our proposition as well.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I would just,
Very
yeah,
interesting, Ben.
Jevons paradox at play. You're able to do more with the same amount, and so expectations are going. You're getting busier and pushing it out more. A tactical example of this that Lucia and Michael, you guys could potentially use. I'm pushing the team right now to, create AI personas of our clients' POCs. So any kind of deliverable that goes through it, it's like what might they think or what might be important within this deliverable to the suite of POCs that grab it. And so that's an example of like going a little bit more above and beyond and finding these little nuggets that will talk to specific people in a different place in the map on that relationship map. So there's a lot of like nuance that can be added, and we can use AI to add a lot of depth to the work that we're doing. And if there's pressure on price, I mean, we use AI to get around that. Like literally, like what's the best sales technique for this situation? Like, how do I approach this deal? Like, I mean, honestly, from a sales perspective, like you lose some, you gain some. Yeah, it's always been like that forever. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, I'd say it's interesting, and it's actually honestly probably one of the largest challenges that we face as like a scaled agency in this space is the difference between like clients that are very, very pro AI and to Ben's point are they're being demanded by leadership to use AI, and that comes with a certain level of expectations for, if a cost of a unit of delivery in theory could be lower, then, should that reflect in the price? And then at the same time, have to still manage clients that have no ability to use AI. And that is quite actually a restrictive position to be as an agency, in that you have to be able to service in both models simultaneously, and make sure that you don't break any data or privacy laws at the same time. And that is like it's a very challenging spot that is probably like one of my larger headaches as a CEO of an experimentation agency. That's a problem. But I do think that the expectation is there. And so I do expect there to be some shifting around in terms of how agencies likely, bill and contract, and how we actually write our contracts and SOWs for our clients, and to best service, the needs of our customers. Because I think in a lot of ways, the historical ways that we've worked might not be how it makes sense to work in the future. But we're sort of stuck in this moment where, like, unless, companies allow us to use the AI, then the benefit is not available. But it's like people want the cake and eat it too. It's like you want to get the benefit, but you then restrict us in the ability to achieve that. And I think that's like, to be honest, is one of the larger headaches that I face.
Wild West.
It
Yeah,
also
no,
it feels like
go
we're
ahead.
missing a perspective here, and the perspective is that of a smaller CRO agency because we all serve as enterprise clients, but For example, I'm also coaching a couple of smaller, like Shopify CRO agencies, and they approach AI in a very interesting way because they basically have no idea what they're doing. But because of the use of AI, they can actually figure out how to run a CRO program and how to do UX research. So that has been very interesting for me to see. They can, without much skills, much technical skills or tool skills or statistical skills, they can get pretty far and they can make a decent living out of it. I'm not saying it's the best, but I've seen them speed up in a really fast way, like understanding how to set up all these programs, how to get clients, how to sell it to clients. And the key there is that the quality can always be improved. But I think for these smaller CRO agencies servicing smaller clients, it's been like this huge advantage that they now have access to all this information. And before, we had CXL and that was it. And maybe you could have a course or go to an event, and that was where you would get your knowledge. And now it's so much easier to access that knowledge and to build a small CRO agency. And that has been also very interesting to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess another piece of evidence that speaks to the opportunity side of this question, which means, yeah, there might be like downward pressure on pricing over here on the right, but on the left, I mean, there's massive opportunity for professional service firms to help businesses implement AI. As evidence of this is, Y Combinator this week put out videos soliciting entries for professional service firms to come in and help them build AI architecture and org specific, what Michael, the vector databases. They don't use that word, but effectively it is like they want you, every company now is going to need an internal world model brain and customer intent side brain. And experimentation folks and programs have been developing the customer intent data layer forever now. And that's actually the huge opportunity that our space has. With the Y Combinator announcement, there's different language there. They don't speak to experimentation necessarily. And we are in a bit of our own echo chamber here, but I think there's massive potential for our skill set to be applied in a lot of new ways. So.
For what it's worth, the agency research that comes back has shown us there isn't a change in pricing, right? In fact, if anything, people have put up their prices in some cases. But what has shifted quite a lot is for savvy clients who are fairly AI savvy, they're expecting greater output, right? Because they're even perhaps realizing it internally. I've heard people in research sort of quoted saying, oh, like I've got one guy now who does the job of like five people, right? And so if these changes are accelerating at clients, then it obviously changes the expectations they have of working with an agency. But what agencies are doing is fundamentally changing anyway at the same time as that's happening. So it's just a massive change overall, which
Yeah, I
leads
do.
me, yeah,
I,
sorry, go
I
ahead.
do think, Craig, that the commoditization type of work is being
Yeah.
compressed and more easily insourced or outsourced in different ways. And so I do find that the direction of more of the strategic work, be the lab, not the test, that's
Yeah,
the direction that we're finding
I
success
agree.
in. Yeah.
That whole thing has collapsed, right? The whole thing of, oh, like, can we get some stuff off your designers, right? So we can create this mock-up of what the experiment would look like. Oh, we need to get back to them. And then it goes back and forward like 16 times. And then eventually you finally create a mock-up of the test. And a month has gone by whilst you're waiting for all of this. And now you can just go click and say, that's what the test is going to look like. Or can we approve it and just get on with building it? Yeah, that looks great, right? Even there's some great plugins now that will pull from the HTML on sites and just create that stuff in Figma. So you get here are the 5 design breakpoint layouts for this page, and then you can hack the pages to put in your experiment change, and it'll create all of those in Figma as well, right? So you've actually created fully working documentation to go off and build the test in a fraction of the time and it's the delay cycles that's going. Can we get these assets? Can we put this brand thing into the page? Can we create that? Is this Figma okay? All of that just collapsed. So yeah, it's commoditizing. There are certain parts of the cycle that are just becoming heavily commoditized now, and there's no value there anymore, right? Because it's
Yeah, I mean,
it's so
Claude,
quick.
Claude plus Slack, and
Yeah, Claude
that's
plus
why
Slack. That's our tool
XBot
stack.
Cursor, that's the direction there to fight that
Yeah.
that harness situation right over on the yeah.
My last question before we ask for audience ones, just a quick answer on this, if you can. What uh, old agency models are dying, and what new ones are appearing from the ashes? So what's going out and what's coming in terms of agency models? Who wants to pick that one first?
So I think I've been doing something different in
Yes.
the industry because I've seen it grow, right? From being one of the only people in the world that will be able to do CRO. And, I could go to LinkedIn, I think a couple of years, well, not a couple of years, 10 years back. There were almost no people having a role of CRO or experimenter. Um, and by now, the market has changed a lot. Like companies know what experimentation is. And I see what I was trying to fight is the fact that all companies actually want experimentation in-house. And at first I was like, no, but I want to help you and I'm here, but I will be external. But instead, we kind of start embracing the fact that companies really want to build their own experimentation programs. And it's great because they're embracing failure, they're building this culture, they're building psychological safety, they're having their people experiment and learn what actually works instead of pushing down what the manager thinks you should do. I think those are all great things for the health of a company, but also the health of people in general. And so we really started to shift from we want to help you as an external partner. We are still an external partner, but we want to help the company's own experimentation eventually. That's our main goal. And we will be happy if they are running their own experimentation program in-house instead of being reliant on us. That would really be the biggest compliment. So we set out a program that we're not just running A/B tests anymore. We're not just doing strategy. We're not just doing research. We're doing all of that. It's a base. But then every month we have like a new focus point. So one of the focus points is implementing workflows and AI. So that's a certain month. But then we also have months where we focus on getting more resources for the team. We have a month where we focus on building a culture inside the team and what kind of rituals and mechanisms can you actually use in order to do that. And then we have the last phase where we try to focus on, okay, can we help you hire? Can we help you transition into doing this yourself? And what's the help you're still actually looking for? And what do you actually still need before you can go and do this in-house fully? So that's something at the initial we have been focusing on.
We need some time for audience questions, so I wouldn't mind moving on to those if you're all okay with that.
That's fine.
I think we have four here. First one, is anyone self-hosting their AI models?
Yeah, so we've got some like multiple experiments of that happening
Yeah.
on servers, on local developer servers, and there's a lot of experience. And we're not only self-hosting some LLMs and have experiments with that, but we're also bringing in a lot of the intelligence layer around not only the vector database, like the all of the data, but the instructions and skills, effectively moving skills away from Claude and onto GitHub to allow us to leverage Gemini or Codex and different things like that as well from wherever we might want to be. And so that's you'll host it locally with the idea of autonomy at some point. I think these LLMs are going to be running on the edge, more and more and out of the data centers. We'll see more and more of that, and I think this will apply to businesses and as well. They'll be running locally a ton. So yeah, we're doing a lot of experimentation there.
Yeah, we're the same as Ben there. That actually using the same. I saw you right on LinkedIn, basically applying the same setup of using GitHub and trying to move the skills outside of the LLMs, because I think that the very obvious thing to me is an LLM is just one company, right? And so we don't want that kind of concentration risk. And just because Claude is the best today, it's not going to be the best next month as we go through the circle of everyone outproducing the next LLM model. And so I think it's important to yeah, be playing with not trapping yourself at this stage in one environment. That I think that we want to have the flexibility to just swap out the brains or like the reasoning mechanism, this is the LLM, but still be able to not have that break the whole machine, which is definitely part of the design of the system, which isn't exactly a self-hosting answer, but I think like is sort of philosophically the same kind of principle.
How do you, how, another question here is how do you keep track of quality for this stuff? Models can change, things can break, all sorts of things can go wrong. Something that worked perfectly before can stop working now or be terrible. How do you define and kind of keep track of quality standards for AI shizzle?
Well, it's a good when something breaks, it's a good way to notice that there's some quality issues. Very, very easy to jump on that. I think otherwise you set up some eval loops. We've got some agents that we run internally, and every month we'll just ask the LLM of like, hey, you ran outputs all month. Can you do some assessment across those outputs and look for patterns and inconsistencies if there are some? And things like that. So I think these eval loops are really handy. We're creating these like one-off agents and publishing them and allowing people to use them. So I've got one, for example, or a couple that are in B2B, one for positioning, one for pricing strategy evaluation. And those we've run like hundreds across like hundreds of different companies, and it's run hundreds of evaluations. Those are real easy to be like, okay, pattern recognition across those, and where have things degraded. So you just use the AI itself to eval it as well, and then do that recursively. And it's pretty easy to do that with Claude Cowork specifically, and setting up those schedules of like assessment and reassessment on the output of the AI. So yeah. And
Always
then you have to
check
have a
this
human like
stuff.
checking that, of like reading out the thing and then making adjustments to the instructions and reference files and materials and context and things like that.
Another good question from Christine here. How is AI changing your customers' customer behavior? Has anyone had any clients kind of question or talk about what's going on with the wider market shift, e-commerce? She says we're running a research piece into our clients' customers' behavior, but keen to hear if clients are asking you about this, you three.
I actually just came from a UX research interview about an AI feature for a client. And so we were speaking there to just a couple of people on how they would start their journey of buying something. And in this case, we spoke about buying products, but also buying insurances. And often people are actually starting in ChatGPT. That was still the most commonly mentioned tool. But they start their journey there. They highly doubt the results, so they always double check. But in a lot of cases, they would start their e-commerce journey there, which I thought was really interesting. And they also usually question if they need to if they need to put in information, they don't accept everything. So, for example, there was for a client we built an AI, also a conversational tool, but the people using that are not always that eager to fill in all personal details because they also don't feel safe. So I think there's a lot of interesting
Hmm,
stuff here that we could talk about forever, but definitely like customer journeys are changing.
interesting. Thank you. Anything to add to that?
I might add that this area is maybe one that I personally might actually be a little bit more like bearish on the speed of change in terms of like how that's happening. And I think that it is certainly for certain companies and certain markets. I think there's going to be quite dramatic change, and I'm sure that that's happening. But I think uh, still for like the majority of large companies, like I don't think that the browser behavior and I don't think the data supports the browsing behavior actually changing at a very fast rate at all. And like even though we see, the LLMs sort of conversions through LLMs increasing at a fast rate, those rates are still like less than 1% of the transactions. And it's like, okay, that's sort of the component that I think we still have to keep going back to. That it's like you think about how long it took for even people to shop online compared to brick and mortar. And
Yeah.
I think, and you kind of ask the question of like, would your parents shop like this? And probably the answer is no. And you think of how long it takes, like the technology might be there that allows that to happen, but the societal shift of how people shopping changes, I think is actually going to be slower than people are expecting, even though the ability to do it is what people are talking about, which sort of creates this sense of urgency. And I do think that's one area to be careful about how we adapt. Browsing behaviors actually don't want to go too fast in some cases, that like you want to be able to meet the customers with where they're at. And obviously that depends on business to business, because there's certain markets with young audiences that's going to be something you got to go really fast. And I think it just starts with research of understanding for like that particular customer set, what is it, and then how to respond to, how to build the right sort of experience to deliver on that.
Websites are going to disappear. I had this conversation with students
Tomorrow,
of
Craig, they
mine
won't even be
about
here. Yeah.
8 years, but it's not going to be a cliff edge, right? It's going to be a slow and gradual change. Well, if it end up with dynamic liquid interfaces, who owns them? Who dynamically generates those for us in future? It won't be Excel with all these icons to do everything you might possibly want to do. There'll be a dynamically generated UI that will do the thing that you want to do and will have a few small options around it. So software, everything is kind of changing, and but I don't think it's going to happen overnight. We will still have websites. It's just going to be diminishing over time, and nobody can really predict when it's going to get to a small percent. But if you say, oh, our AI traffic from for e-commerce has gone up 465%, yeah, but you started with 0.001% of traffic, right? So a 465% increase is still not a lot on your bottom line. But it's happening. It's just people argue about when, I think, is the most important thing. Um, this was wonderful. I think we don't have time for any more questions. I'm sorry, I did miss two or three of your questions. We just didn't have time. They were all really darned good. Thank you ever so much. That was interesting in a very good way. Nice to hear such different perspectives, but also a lot of commonalities. Um, Fill out that survey that I put a link to earlier on. It takes about 8 minutes. If you can't find the link, just search for me on LinkedIn and there'll be a post about it. And thank you again to the panel for coming along, and to Convert and Speero for making this happen. And most of all, thank you to our lovely audience. And I'm now going to switch to our prize draw, right? The best way to finish up entirely. So let me just refresh my screen. Da, da, da. Here we go. And I'm going to share, and I'm then going to spin the wheel and see who wins this. Let's go. And it's Rohan. Thank you very much. Get in touch with us, Rohan. You now have license to burn tokens for the next month. Tell us what you do with them as well. Thank you everyone for coming along, being a lovely audience, and to our panel and everyone else. Thanks ever so much. Bye bye, everyone.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Greg.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks, y'all.